Chefs Without Restaurants, episode 153 with Christopher Curtin from ECLAT Chocolate.
Always surround yourself with the best people. Even, if there's two places in town and one's a world-class chocolatier and the other one's like a mediocre bakery, but you really want to do bakery, I would still go work for the chocolatier because you're going to learn more on just how to work and ethics and just the whole culture of doing something really well than going to work for something mediocre. Even that's what your passion is. I know that might make no sense to some people, but it'll pay off in the long run.
This is the Chefs Without Restaurants podcast with your host, Chris Spear. Each week, I'll be speaking with food entrepreneurs and people in the culinary industry. If you're interested in learning more about our organization dedicated to helping people build and grow their food businesses, look us up on the web at chefswithoutrestaurants.com and .org, and on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Chefs Without Restaurants. Now, enjoy the show. Welcome to the Chefs Without Restaurants podcast. I'm your host, Chris Spear. On the show, I have conversations with culinary entrepreneurs and people in the food and beverage industry who took a different route. They're caterers, research chefs, personal chefs, cookbook authors, food truckers, farmers, cottage bakers, and all sorts of culinary renegades. I myself fall into the personal chef category, as I started my own personal chef business, Perfect Little Bites, 11 years ago. And while I started working in kitchens in the early 90s, I've literally never worked in a restaurant. Hey, good morning, everyone, or afternoon, or whenever it is you're listening to this. Thanks so much for tuning in to this week's episode of the Chefs Without Restaurants podcast. So today we have another chocolate episode. Chocolate's delicious. You can never really have too many chocolate episodes. So this week's guest is Christopher Curtin. He is the certified master chef and chocolatier behind ECLAT Chocolate, which he founded in Westchester, Pennsylvania in 2004. Interestingly enough, I was living in Westchester when he opened the shop, which is how I first got to know of him. After attending culinary school, he spent 14 years honing his skills alongside some of the world's top chocolate makers across Belgium, France, Germany, Switzerland, Spain, and Japan. That's some really awesome training. A lot of people kind of go to one country and focus on that type of chocolate. ECLAT's gone on to receive some really great acclaim in recent years. They were recognized as having, quote, the best chocolate in America by Bon Appetit magazine. And he's gone on to do some really awesome collabs with Eric Ripert and Anthony Bourdain, as well as he has an upcoming one with Jean-Georges, which he talks about on the episode. He's also worked with Victory Brewing, one of my favorite breweries. You might know that I had Bill Kowaleski, co-founder of the brewery, on the podcast. So it was really cool to hear that he was doing a hop beer chocolate. I haven't tried that yet, but I'm going to have to seek it out. So we talked about his take on the chocolate business and what makes ECLAT stand out. I wanted to know, what wisdom he's picked up in 18 years. Are there any secrets to the longevity? How do you stand out in a market that seems possibly oversaturated? I wanted to talk about employees. Where is he finding them? What kind of people are coming to work for him in his chocolate shop? And we kind of talk about traditional approaches to both chocolate making and maybe how you run a kitchen. He says gimmicks aren't really his thing. While they do some interesting stuff like chocolate with thyme and mushroom, he says that he doesn't really want to do something like bacon in chocolate, which I'm going to be honest, I kind of love, but I get his point. And when we were talking about documentation in the kitchen, I am very pro phone as long as it's being used for work. But it sounds like he is not really in favor of that and still wants to hold on to the traditional notepad because, once you kind of open the floodgates there, how do you control that with your employees? So I thought that was interesting because most of the chefs that I'm talking to these days really love having the phones in the kitchen for the technological aspect. So where do you stand on this? Let me know. So let's jump into the episode. I hope you enjoy this one. As always, I welcome comments. Find me on Instagram at Chefs Without Restaurants or hit me up via email at chefswithoutrestaurants@gmail.com. As always, go to chefswithoutrestaurants.org. You can sign up for our weekly newsletter where I think I'm sharing some really interesting stuff. You can get gig referrals and leads if you work as a personal chef or a caterer. And you can also find the free Facebook group where we're having conversations around food entrepreneurship and just, building some fun relationships. So the show will be coming right up after a word from this week's sponsor. COVID has redefined the world of dining. While the pandemic certainly upended the restaurant experience, the personal chef industry experienced record growth. The United States Personal Chef Association represents nearly 1,000 chefs around the US and Canada, and even Italy. USPCA provides a strategic backbone that includes liability insurance, training, communications, certification, and more. It's a reassurance to consumers that the chef coming into their home is prepared to offer them an experience along with their meal. Now, join with our Inflation Fighter special and save $75 on Premier, Provisional, and Preparatory memberships. You can join today at uspca.org and use code InflationFighter22. You can call Angela with questions at 1-800-995-2138 extension 705 or email her at aprather@uspca.org. Payment plans are available. And as always, all this information will be in the show notes. And now, on with the show. Thanks so much, and have a great week. Hey, good morning, Chef. Welcome to the show. Thanks so much for coming on.
Good morning.
I'm excited to talk to you about chocolate today. It's one of my favorite things. I had another chocolatier. We have someone here in Frederick that has a shop, and he came on a couple weeks ago. So we're kind of doing some chocolate talk this season.
Oh, that's great to know. I mean, we're not the regular breed, it seems. We're a little bit different than the savory chefs or even the pastry chefs. So,
what year did you start the shop?
We're on 18 years now.
Wow,
so
I can't believe it's been that long. It's crazy. I mean, so for our listeners, I used to live in Westchester, and I was living there when you opened shop. And I remember I could walk there. I lived on Gay Street, and you were a couple blocks from where I was living. And I was really excited when you opened up. But I've lived in Frederick, Maryland now for 15 years this summer. So that sounds right. It sounds crazy to me that it's been that long. But 18 years, huh?
I can't believe it. And then 14 years, in Europe before that. And so I put those years together, and I'm like, I can't be that old. And then again, occasionally it dawns on me that yes, I am officially that old. So
what is it? Time flies when you're having fun.
Yeah, it's. I think I posted that the other day about the anniversary of. I actually got my Meister diploma, or the last exam day of the exam was on July 4th in Germany when I did that. The 6-day exam. So it's kind of ironic that I became a Meister on July 4th.
So what is a Meister?
Konditormeister is sort of, I wouldn't compare, you can't compare everything to MOF. It's a little bit different. It's more book related than doing giant showpieces like in France, but it's sort of like the MOF. It's you're a certified Meister, and anybody who has a pastry shop or bakery in Germany at least has to have a Meister on premise, even if it's like brownies and stuff. That might have changed since I've left, but they're pretty strict about that. So that guarantees a certain level of quality, it seems.
How did you get into this, the chocolate making? Was it something you were always interested in? And I mean, I want to hear a little bit about your training and where you studied.
You never know where these things start out from, but in another lifetime, before I did kitchen work, I did a cross-country ski racing and bike racing. Ski racing was really my thing, and obviously I supplemented that in the summer by doing bike racing and training with all the speed skaters in my hometown, which in Madison, Wisconsin was kind of the mecca of bike racing and speed skating in the 80s. I just loved the intensity of bike racing and ski racing. Ski racing is actually very technical, so you can win a race by not being as strong or as fit, but just purely by working more efficiently and skiing more smart. And that's very much like kitchen work, where you're working on technique and just knife skills and being aware of your surroundings. And so to me, ski racing is an endurance sport, just like working in the kitchen is an endurance sport. So it's you're kind of putting those two together. And so I just loved working in high-end kitchens, and usually kitchens of quality. That's the similarity.
I don't know that I would put those two together and see the similarity. I mean, when you explain it like that, it makes sense.
To me, I mean, even the old quotes in the kitchen, with movement and economy of motion and things like that. And those are all the things that ski racing is all about. That's to me the correlation between sports and kitchen work, especially technical sports.
Well, chocolate making is such a specialized thing. How did you get into the chocolate making? Did you grow up like really interested in sweets and desserts and all that?
I worked in the kitchens. My first job was at 14 Pattying Hamburgers at a place called Dudley Humphrey Stoury in Madison. They got best burger in America and USA Today back in the, 70s or something. And then I went to school and thinking I was going to be a professor like everyone else in my family. And then I'm like, what am I doing? And then I went back to working at different kitchens. I worked at the Flagstaff House and just got really interested in amazing kitchens and just the culture of the kitchens and trying to do things well. And then I went to a brief stint at a culinary school out in Vermont. And I'm like, why am I paying all this money when I could learn from, the horse's mouth or direct from the very best? So that's when I went to Europe and thinking I'd be there for a year and got stuck and then almost didn't come back and came back 14 years later and worked all over.
So that was 14 years, like in a straight shot, like you went over there and were just there for 14 years?
Yeah. So, Belgium, France, Germany, Switzerland, Spain, and then I was a year in Japan.
Now, at that point, were you just looking to do chocolate or did you tinker with savory while you were over there?
I did some savory, but mostly pastry, bake. I worked a year in a bakery. I did a month in a butcher shop just because I was in Germany. So I just, to me, it's so important to be curious and you might learn something there that even I knew I would never be a butcher. It's interesting to see how someone do something and you might learn. And also people that are successful and work really technically precise, you learn things from them, like even how they hold something or so it's just so important to be curious. And like I said, even though I knew I'd never be a butcher, it was an important lesson to work in that field. It's completely different than chocolate, obviously. So I learned pastry, small breads. That was part of the exam. But I really felt that there was, let's do something different. And maybe I figured that out for my father because my father was a historian and nobody was doing African history when he first started out. And he actually started the first African studies program in the country and became very well known for the history of slave trade and all over world history. He found a niche that not many people were doing. So in Europe, at least, there's a lot of mid-sized chocolate companies. Here, there's Blummer, where it's all computerized, and there's 4 guys sitting at a computer program, panel, and that's it. Or there's a really small artisan people like myself. There seems to be not very many mid-sized chocolate companies. But in Europe, we have, like Copenhagen and some other places I worked, Marcolini and other places I worked at, they had 30 to 40 people on the floor, producing. So you learn a lot about quality, but also learn how to continue that quality in I wouldn't say mass production, but in a larger scale.
Now, did you have aspirations to come back and open a chocolate shop? Like, what was your mindset when you were over there learning?
I did. I have huge respect for, especially, the pastry chef at Four Seasons, and I see what he does and, sometimes miss the fact that I could have gone and done something with Four Seasons or a chain or Ritz-Carlton or done something really unique in a chain like that and what they have to offer. But the goal from day one was to come back and start my own place.
First of all, why Westchester? Because it sounds like you're obviously not from there. And, what was set the stage? How did you get that shop open?
Well, it's very interesting. It's obvious because my parents were retired. My father and both my parents went to Swarthmore, and my father taught at Swarthmore, and my uncle was at Swarthmore. And so they're all from this area, sort of. My father was born in Philadelphia, even though his family was living down in West Virginia with my grandfather's work. And I decided, it's time to come home and do something. Madison is an amazing town, but it's in the middle of, it's nowhere. It's sort of like Collegeville in Pennsylvania. It's like this one tiny liberal island in the rest. So it's an amazing place, but I could see if I had larger aspirations that, to come out east and it was time to spend some time with my parents before the inevitable. And so it was really nice. And here, you can hit New York in a day, you can hit DC in a day. You're pretty central. So it's really nice. So that was sort of, again, another sort of planned reason why I came back to the East Coast, be with my parents, but also, I just thought it was a good location business-wise.
How's the business evolved? Like, what did you start out serving or produce? What did you start out producing when you opened the shop 18 years ago and like where you are now? How has that changed?
We do Éclat chocolate. and we do that brand, and we kind of sort of play with the kind of Dwell magazine meets, it's definitely more innovative with the parallel bars, the Mondiants, which have just gotten worldwide attention, which are kind of funky in their own right.
Those are delicious.
Yeah, they're, some chefs that I truly respect say they're the most amazing things I've ever had. So we're really, and that's just being goofy one day and just seeing how we can make a flattened truffle for those who haven't had it before. But we also want to keep our foot in the tradition. So we do some very traditional style cut ganaches and things like that. I think it's important to sort of highlight tradition and always keep one foot there. I think there's too much, this sounds horrible, but almost too much innovation sometimes where, people have to do stuff to be wacky and to trying to set themselves apart. But if you can do a creme brulee, I always say perfectly, then that's okay. But most people can't do a beautiful, perfect creme brulee. So they do a wacky, like ginger, passion fruit creme brulee, or to sort of hide the imperfections. So I believe that a little bit in the airbrush chocolate now. That's a very easy way to make beautiful looking chocolate and sort of mask any, imperfections of enrobing and things like that. It's absolutely gorgeous for those, how the people are now airbrushing molds with cocoa butter. It's a new technique, and we do some of it, but I think it's really important to sort of highlight the classics still.
And I don't know a lot about chocolate and where, what the different countries and styles are like. Do you have a favorite that you lean towards?
I don't. And that's why, a lot of people, you see, like I'm a Swiss chocolatier or I'm a French chocolatier. And I purposely worked all over the world, and, the Japanese with technique and just how meticulous they are was just beautiful. And their flavor, some of their even like green tea or, soba flavor ganaches are kind of interesting. But every country does things just slightly different. So you might, unfortunately, after, before the 14 years, like at 12 years in, I might work in Belgium and pick up two things that whole year I was in Belgium. So, but those 2 years really, or those two things really made a difference. So, of course, your learning curve slows down, unfortunately. I wish it would keep going at the same rate as when you start out. But, just those two things alone are worth that year of working in that one place. So, a lot of people like to work in a place and then switch, and then they keep switching and switching. But I think it's important to stay at a place and also learn, because those two things you learn, you might, will definitely help you in the long run.
Well, it sounds like you aren't doing a lot of crazy, wacky stuff, but where do you find inspiration? Like, are you trying?
Well, define wacky.
Well,
wacky, crazy.
Like you were saying, passion fruit creme brulee, like maybe not your thing. Like, go for a classic type thing. So, are you doing? I mean, the Mondants are innovative, but where are you kind of pulling inspiration from these days?
We were so thrilled, and that was one of my goals, and we really to be in the MoMA gift shop. And being from Madison and Wisconsin, Frank Lloyd Wright comes to mind, and the whole, I'm old enough to have lived through the mid-century modern and having, Ames chairs growing up and, when they're inexpensive. So that modern design, or i.e., it's not modern anymore, but sort of that sort of modern stint on things and keeping it simple, clean, very like the Danish, Japanese style is I love that stuff. And, define wacky. Is a ginger caramel wacky? We don't want to be kitschy. Like, we don't want to put bacon in chocolate and things like that. I don't think that works. It has kind of a shock value. When we go, the craziest flavor that we've done that I don't consider crazy is a preserved lemon with black olive. So you're sort of mimicking traditional Moroccan flavors. And you're basically picking up the saltiness from the olives with the saltiness in the lemon and the citrus. So, it's interesting what, is considered wacky and new, but also chocolate is very, very traditional. And you usually go to chocolate when you want something to sort of comfort you, or, you just want something that's simple and tastes good. So you're balancing those two worlds a little bit.
Well, I think sometimes the wackiness is to stand out, which, one of the questions I like to get to is, how do you stand out? This is a market that's, I don't know if you'd say it's oversaturated or full, but there's a lot of choices for chocolate, even high-end chocolate. So how do you differentiate? How do you get people to come into your shop or buy your stuff online when there's already a decent amount out there?
I think we're sort of under the radar because we've intentionally kind of gone the MoMA or Dwell magazine design and also flavor that not everyone appreciates. You know, like green tea, or we do sort of if there's any complaints about our chocolates, usually that the flavor isn't pronounced enough, because we are a chocolate company, so we want our chocolate to taste and then have it sort of back up or be supported by a ginger or a green tea or passion fruit or something like that. You're not going to get this wallop of passion fruit and then in the back you kind of go, oh yeah, there's chocolate there a little bit. So, you know, that's one thing we consider with our design, I think.
So then is some of it marketing? Like, it sounds like you're trying to have like an aesthetic, you know, like when you talk about like Dwell and MoMA, I mean, that's a certain style. And I think,
it's definitely,
you got to kind of have some marketing there behind you. And that comes back to like having people working with you and helping figure out what that plan looks like.
I mean, to be honest, we do kind of, you know, like, oh, we're missing a nut component, right? So then we create something really groovy with a liquidy or a chewy caramel with a hazelnut, or we do sort of pick and design things around a collection, or, you know, sort of like an artist would paint certain styles, or a furniture maker would design, or almost like a fashion, you know, would have different labels to design for different people, you know. So we love the destination bars because they're relatively simple, and we do a PHL bar. They're all based on airport codes. And so, like, how can we make something that's approachable that literally someone can buy and eat and sort of enjoy while they're driving down the road? So that's kind of like our sort of theory behind that one. But then we're thinking of the parallel bars, which are 6 lines of chocolate, but 2 flavors. So the flavors sort of merge and kind of go across the bar while you're eating it. I mean, it's not going to be a large, you know, jump from, you know, mushroom and then thyme. And the mushroom is not going to be like obnoxiously pronounced. It's going to be just sort of subtly. So you get this umami sort of earth tone of mushroom.
Yeah, I got to try those at the Philly Chef Conference. Really delicious.
Obviously I'm biased, but I think that's kind of cool. And there again, is that crazy? Is that wacky?
Yes, bit.
But, you know, that's literally hanging out after service with a chef friend with a glass of wine and like, okay, you know, what do you want me to see out of chocolate? And they're like, yeah, make something with mushroom, like, you know, just trying to, and I'm like, okay. And so we like, you know, making things that sound weird, but then once you try, it's like, it would be amazing on a cheese plate, for example. It's all in when you serve it, how you serve it.
When did you start doing online? I mean, the internet has changed things. 18 years ago, I'm sure you probably weren't selling chocolate online, but now that's a viable business path for people.
I think almost from at least the first year, we had an online presence, and then the shopping cart probably was added that same first year.
Really? That seems like, I mean, like 18 years ago, e-commerce was
Don't quote me on that.
Yeah, but, you know, e-commerce, now everyone's doing it, but I think that was kind of a rarity.
Yeah, I mean, and now it's amazing. I mean, because we're so unique, and I mean, it's interesting we do some really interesting projects with like Nick Elmy in Philadelphia. He's been great. I mean, we do all the Four Seasons stuff, but as far as, you know, getting the reach out there, it's been great. When we're nationwide, we're shipping nationwide to every, you know, state, and then Japan, and then we're actually shipping more and more to Europe, which is really interesting. We're getting known for this sort of design. I would never compare ourselves to the Ames, but we're doing something different with the Mondiants and the parallel bars, and the Peruvian Nacional truffle is just so simple, but something is going on. Something really special is going on with the Peruvian Nacional truffle.
What is that?
It's the same chocolate bean or chocolate that was featured on the Anthony Bourdain show when we took them down to Peru, but we make a truffle with it, and it's purely just butter, cream, chocolate. But it was best truffle in America by Food and Wine or Bon Appetit, I forget. Oh, one of those small publications. Yeah, no, it's like embarrassing. I should keep the tab, but it's not really why we do it. But they gave us a huge shout out about that. And it's so funny because it's not airbrushed, it's not gimmicky, it's not multi-layered, it's just pure chocolate. And because of how many white beans are in this chocolate, there's still full flavored, full high percent cacao, but it's sort of lighter in flavor, but it lasts in your mouth for, 10 minutes later almost. So, it's the chocolate that how I was introduced to Eric Repair and how he sort of got noticed or took notice of us. And that led us down the path of the Good and Evil bar with Bourdain and him.
Rest in peace.
Yes. It's kind of funny. That's the simplest one we do. Simplest one, but it's all technique driven. Again, that's kind of, you don't see that when you eat it, but behind the scenes, it's really interesting how we make it. But it seems like a regular truffle.
That was the first time I remember seeing you in a big publication. Again, when I was living in Westchester, it was like, oh, it's like a nice, quaint little small chocolate shop. Like a lot of places have small chocolate shops. And then having moved away and then seeing you in a national publication, I was like, oh, damn, like this is like some serious stuff. I mean, doing a collab with Eric Repair and Anthony Bourdain's no small feat.
Yeah, I still laugh about that. I mean, you can't plan that.
Now, do you like doing those collaborations? Is it fun to kind of work with other people and other businesses? And
I do, actually. I like it a lot because we know what we know. And, if I set on my designer hat and, kind of like, oh, we're going to design a new line for Thanksgiving or for whatever, I kind of know what direction I'm going to go in. But if you start working, like we're doing a project, it's already been launched, so I think I can talk about it. But with Jean George, and we're doing a deconstructed Thai green chili curry thing. And, working with him versus working with Repair, it's just totally different. I mean, Repair is, very subtle, very sort of umami. It's just sort of very, very zen. No pun intended there. And Jean George, he wants his flavors really forward. So the chili is like scorching hot and the lime is like totally lime forward. So it's really interesting to work with these guys and you pick up different style points and it's like, oh, it's really interesting. It's like a chef learning different cuisines, like what Soraya and those guys are doing. It's, they're doing Condessa, and every time they go to a new cuisine and master it, they're going to learn something that will help their other kitchens as well.
Do you still get out and get to be around with people, work with people? And I guess if not, do you miss that? Because I find that's one of the things a lot, most of the people on my show are solopreneurs or have small teams and they don't get to continue learning and they're not working with people.
Well, the ideas of hanging out with other chefs after work, like at 1 o'clock in the morning. I mean, I miss that, but I'm also not 24 anymore. So, those things have changed. I try and get out about, there's some amazing chefs in Philly right now, and James Maddy, the pastry chef from Soraya, is great to sort of hang out with and see what he's doing. And of course, we're very good friends with Fork and that whole team. Yeah, so it's every time you hang out. I mean, even the Mushroom and Thyme was, just hanging out with someone, like I said, just late night, just sort of figure out what we could do that's funky. So I think you're always inspired when you hang out with smarter, more talented people than you are. Find who's doing amazing stuff, and hopefully you can, learn something from them.
Did I see you did a collab with Victory Beer?
Yeah, that was one of the first ones. It was the first collab that they did. And it was, again, sort of our, I wouldn't say impish, but kind of, everyone's doing champagne truffles. It's one of the things, champagne, raspberry, with some other, caramel. It's like the cliche of a chocolate assortment has to have those in it. And we're like, hey, what's this? No, we're going to stop making champagne truffles and we're going to make a beer truffle.
I love their beer. I had Bill Kowaleski on the podcast last year. And then as a tie-in, I did some beer dishes using their stuff. I actually did a beer truffle. I mean, my truffles are not anything like yours, but I think I did okay. Like a hand-rolled truffle, not like a very fancy, just like melt my chocolate in beer.
I wasn't a beer guy, and I wasn't a beer guy with food. And and this is a shame since I lived in Belgium and other places. Until I was blessed with being at the tryout dinner of Terence Fleury at Fork when he was a chef there. And he did a beer pairing with his food. And I'm like, okay, now I get it. So I love the fact that, you can continue learning, or you have these ideas that you think are like, well, beer is overrated. And then someone like his talent comes along and you're like, oh, okay, now I get why people are excited about beer.
I didn't like beer when I was younger, and it wasn't really until I moved to the Philly area, and we had so many great craft breweries. I mean, now they're a dime a dozen everywhere, but back in 2002, I guess when we moved to Westchester, like, you had Iron Hill there, but getting into Philly, like you had some really great places like Monk's and Standard Tap and places I like to hang out. And I got in with a crowd of people who liked some really good beer. And that's kind of where my love of beer started, was when I was in the Philly area.
Victory is a sort of an interesting story, because as I said, I'd like to think that we're similar, and they don't do anything. Well, they've started since the new ownership, but they didn't do funky stuff. They just did it really well. And I think that's, if you had to describe Éclat, I know people they mentioned the mushroom, like that's not true. But I think to us, everything seems to have a purpose, and it doesn't seem strange because it has a purpose. And like, this is why this is, interesting to have the mushroom and thyme. Yeah, I see the sort of philosophy of Victory very similar to ours.
What about longevity? I mean, did you ever think about throwing in the towel? Was there a time where it was like, okay, I've had enough of this, it's not working?
At different points you're like, what am I doing this? But then that's the fun part, is keep, overriding that urge to throw it in. And you learn very simply, very quickly, that great things will happen or not happen the minute you give up. So I think anyone's had a small business. I would say, yeah, we've had times when we've been frustrated. Throwing in the towel, I said never has happened with me.
I mean, it's just hard. It's hard having a small business, especially these past couple of years. I mean, how was 2020 and last year for you?
It was surprisingly well, and that's why I think we went out of our way to support the restaurants in Philly with anything we could do. We tried to do, and also for the hospitals, and because with all our inline presence, we did amazingly well. I mean, all things considering, the key is, how do you produce in that environment and keep everyone safe? And that was the main, what we sort of rigged up here with curtains and dividers and, filters and face masks. I mean, to work with a mask and a shield in a kitchen is not the most pleasant thing, but the team was just, they knew the purpose and they knew the goals. And so they were amazing with that.
I like to talk about goals. Are you someone who sets goals? And if so, you have anything that you'd want to share, either short-term, long-term, like what you're working on?
I think, our goal is just to keep doing the quality that we're doing and do it, try to do it with a certain style and grace, as, the old Clint Eastwood movie. But I think it's important for us to, continue taking care of our staff. I mean, we, for 10 years now, have had, matching 401k, full healthcare benefits, PTO, all those things. And, we did that way before a lot of people started doing, just to maintain because I was used to the European system. So the minute we could start affording it, we did it. And just things like that, it has to run smoothly and with a certain efficiency and the quality and the climate of where, the people come into work. I've worked in factories where the 40 people that come in were just miserable, and they're just working. It wasn't a passion to them. So we want to continue sort of having this culture here where we, if you really want to go work in Japan for a couple of weeks and have that experience, I can send you there. If you want to go work up at numerous restaurants up in New York, even in the savory side, I can send you there. So, we're kind of all over the place is what we can offer people, not just PTO, but also, sort of a life experience. Even if it's something that they don't want to be a baker, but they want to work for an amazing baker, I can send them somewhere in Europe or in Germany. So we're kind of all over the place with, sort of a lifestyle kind of way of running Éclat. And that's some reasons why we've stayed small. I mean, we're a lot larger than people, I think, perceive us as, but, we're in 22 Whole Foods and a bunch of other, products here and there. We do a couple lines for some Swiss companies, but to me, growth is not the number one thing. Growth with all those added benefits and keeping the culture where everyone's happy to work here. There's always a couple people that don't work out for whatever reasons, but I would say if you talk to the team here, they're all generally happy to be here and they're motivated and they're excited to do new things.
So who is your team and where are they coming from? Are they culinary students? Are they people who want to have careers in pastry and chocolate?
I would say they're from all across. We have 2 people that have graduated from culinary school. We have a couple of people that graduated from Westchester and were the perfect fit for mentality and stayed on. And then sort of a hybrid of people with culinary and other experiences. So it's, I hate to quote like all these business books, but we hire the person, then we figure out where they fit. And that's always been the case. So we might have hired you to be our marketing director, but we found out actually you're really good at, running something else. So we'll just put you there. And if that's what you want to do. And we also said, where do you want to be in this organization? And we've usually tailored their position to what they want to do. I mean, there's always stuff you don't want to do in a job, but, we try and, we're not perfect that way, and that seems to work out really well. And people, and even if hey, I would really like to learn that. So we just, I come in Saturday and we teach them how to airbrush or do showpieces or something like that. Or, if I have certain connections with kitchen chefs and I could place somebody in an amazing kitchen, even after they decide to leave here, I'm glad to do that because that's what happened to me in Europe.
Looks like I missed the boat. I should have just asked you if you were hiring when I lived there. It seems like I would have had a much different career path and maybe I would have gotten to go some cool places.
We're a very interesting culture here. And I think, everyone is so motivated but because of that, we attract a certain person and also we do some amazing things, so it's an exciting time for us. I definitely feel.
What do you recommend for people who want to get into this as a career? Should you go to culinary school? Should you do what you did, travel to Europe, go to different places? How does someone get started in chocolate?
I wish they would have almost like a 6-month culinary school where you learn all the, when proteins coagulate, all these sort of the book smarts that you need. And then the rest is find the best kitchens to work for. Or even kitchens that you respect because they have, the new style of kitchens and how they run it. Because that all wears off of you. I mean, when I was younger, unfortunately, I worked in a few bad kitchens where all I did was pick up bad habits. And I just worked at some places out of convenience. I need a job, so I'm going to work there. But if I had given a little more effort, I mean, in hindsight I did okay and I worked in some amazing places. But I always think about, I should not have turned that job down, but I didn't want to learn another language. I didn't want to work in another language I didn't speak. So, or some other silly excuse when I was younger. But yeah, always surround yourself with the best people. Even, if there's 2 places in town and one's a world-class chocolatier and the other one's like a mediocre bakery, but you really want to do bakery, I would still go work for the chocolatier because you're going to learn more on just how to work and ethics and just the whole culture of doing something really well than going to work for something mediocre. Even that's what your passion is. I know that might make no sense to some people, but it'll pay off in the long run.
No, that makes total sense. It goes back to kind of the hiring for the person and attitude and not the skill set, that it's the core building blocks of how you work. So it makes so much sense.
Yeah, like working in the butcher shop, which I mentioned earlier. I mean, learning how to make blood sausage. I'm never going to make blood sausage, but just seeing how they make it is, they call it flunts in Cologne and the Polish dialect there, but it's just keep being curious and keep learning and don't switch jobs every 3 months. It's another thing.
Well, I guess talking about knowledge, what do you wish you knew before you opened your own business? Is there something that you were really not prepared for and was like, oh, I maybe would have learned, I don't know, accounting or something before I did it?
I wish I would have taken more notes on places I worked at, or I wish I would have kept those notes. It's more, I've forgotten so much stuff about certain pastries or, baking and things that it's all in my head still, some of it, but there are a lot of just even temperatures or, some of the things I learned about flours and different flours when I was baking in Europe. Those are things that I kind of miss. Everyone that works here should have a notebook and take notes because 20 years from now, it's like, wow, how did they get that flavor into that ganache? And then they'll be like, man, I wish I remembered that.
Well, now technology is amazing, right? Like you've got your phone, it's a notepad, it's a camera, it's an audio recorder, you can do video. I mean, like there's no excuse not to be documenting what you're doing.
No, not at all.
As long as you can control it. I mean, I worked in kitchens that had strict no phone policies, and I was always pushing back against my GM and saying, like, yeah, I get it. I don't want cooks like texting their girlfriend while they're on the line, but we need to be making notes and you know, kind of documenting our journey. You know, I kind of lean on the more modern side of that kind of thing as opposed to like no phones in the kitchen.
Because it's slippery slope, that's why I like notebooks. And nobody here has a phone on them at work. Because if you're focused and you're, you know, really work at work, of course, I'm showing how old I am, but I am paying you to work, not be on your phone. So to me, I know I sound like, you know, get off my lawn, you know, grandpa, but it's sort of interesting. Like, wait, I'm paying you, but you're texting and I know that's not what you're saying, but you're texting your friend, right? Like, how, like, you know, so.
Well, it is hard because you open your phone to take a photo and then you see a text and you go down that rabbit hole. Like that's how technology gets you, right? Like you open Facebook to send one message and next thing you know, it's 45 minutes later. And where did that time go?
Yeah. And, you know, I've people that work in the office, have worked in the office, and there's this industry norm that you can sit and answer emails while you're at work. And I'm like, wait a minute. Yeah, it seems odd to me. I mean, but I'm of the era when I grew up and I worked where we had no iPhone. So, you know, the great photos I missed out on taking is because we didn't have a camera in our pocket. I didn't really answer the question about what I wish I knew more. I mean, obviously, I just wish I had more of a businessman's mentality versus, I wouldn't say artist, but more chef. I mean, we've done okay, but it's just interesting you should keep learning on things you don't know. You know, it seems like the mantra today is be curious, but you're not going to know everything when you start your own business. That's for sure.
I'm someone who always wants to be learning something, you know, like even if it doesn't seem pertinent to the job at hand today, you never know what you're going to need. And I always go back to culinary school of like, you know, I was 18 and what I thought I was going to do, I didn't end up doing. And when you're in the midst of it, you're kind of, I don't want to say like blowing things off, but like you're in nutrition class and learning vegetarian. It's like, I'm never going to want to cook vegetarian. And then like 20 years later, you're like, oh, wow, I wish I paid more attention in that.
Yeah, I wish I had those notes. And, you know, there's all this amazing stuff I did. These like sort of sponge cakes and things we did in Japan with a wooden frame and things like that I wish I would have paid more attention to. So, you know, when it's appropriate, you know, take photos, ask questions.
Great words of advice. Well, thanks so much for coming on the show. I've enjoyed talking to you today.
Thank you. If you have any more questions, please let me know. And I love talking to you today as well.
Was there anywhere you want to send people to? Website, social media, all of it?
I mean, check out, you know, Éclat Chocolate on Instagram and Facebook. And also, you know, obviously éclatchocolate.com is our website for purchasing and just kind of see the products that we're making and designing.
Great. I'll send everyone there. Links will be in the show notes as well.
Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. And to all of our listeners, thanks so much for tuning in. This has been Chris with the Chefs Without Restaurants podcast. Go to chefswithoutrestaurants.org to find our Facebook group, mailing list, and chef database. The community's free to join. You'll get gig opportunities, advice on building and growing your business, and you'll never miss an episode of our podcast. Have a great week.